make me lay awake at night because in the big picture of things, it's a pretty small issue.
I just want to clarify that it's not 5.3 million that's coming out of this year's budget for closing the retirement gap. It's being amortized over
I'm saying
a
that's
time
our
period.
annual payment though, right?
No, it's around, I think it's the 400,000.
No,
that is-
what's our annual payment to pay off the COPs and the pension obligation bonds?
Okay, I thought you were talking about the retirement system.
No,
so,
it's pension
okay.
obligation bonds, which is part of the retirement
Well,
system. When you add up the
that's-
pension obligation, 4.5 million plus 800,000, that's 5.3 million. That's what we're paying this year toward those two. That's general fund dollars is paying off those units.
Mr. Mitchell.
Actually, Johnny, I was going to say it's a little bit more because we have the other money that's not on the chart. So it is a little bit more than that. When we talk about long-term strategies, is the comments earlier that Supervisor Smith made. I think it's going to get worse next year. The economy is not in great shape. California economy in particular, we're talking about reassessments. We do have $150,000 that we will pay off the Munis system, but we have a number of improvements that we need to make to that system, so I'm not counting that as real income. By being creative and looking at other ways to do things, there are different ways that you can approach pension plans, and not everybody needs to be in the pension plan. And those are all discussions that we need to have with our representatives, the board representatives, and have those dialogues. There are simply some other ways that you can spend the money rather than the way that we're spending it out. If you look at the model of at private enterprise, they change their compensation plans all the time based on what their current needs are. Not everybody needs to belong to a retirement system the day they walk in the door because everybody has a different strategy. So I think we need to talk about that, but we do need to talk about how we grow in this county because that's what's going to provide the money with economic development that we talk about to solve some of these problems that we have here. Otherwise, we're going to be at the table every single year having this same discussion. I come from a county where we actually have a teeter plan that works. In Calaveras County, the teeter plan provided about $600,000 a year. The Board of Supervisors, long before my time, had made a decision that all money comes from teeter was dedicated toward technology. So I never had to worry about where my next server was going to come from, or if I was going to go undertake an IT project. That money was available because the board dedicated that funding. And the only reason I bring that up is if at some point we do solve the teeter problem, then it's going to take discipline that the money is spent for a specific purpose rather than just going into an overall general fund. Where agencies have gotten in trouble for years and years and years, and I go back to 1978, 79 was with federal revenue sharing, and federal revenue sharing dollars used to come to agencies throughout the United States. And the agencies that were successful took those dollars and they put them into capital improvements and they took them into infrastructure. The agencies that were not successful invested those dollars in staff costs. And so you do have to be disciplined about what you're doing. We fully acknowledge that what we're giving you in this presentation is just using teeter as a balancing strategy, but we think there are a number of opportunities with working out public-private partnerships and reducing our general fund contribution to solid waste. We think there are some opportunities to change the way we do business that will save us money in the long run. That's going to be our goal over the next year because it will be difficult for us to change what's going to happen by next year unless we get serious about how it is we're going to undertake these things. We have Chris Stone is in the audience. He has a major housing development proposed here that we're working through, not to pick on Chris, but eventually that's going to provide additional property tax dollars. Although I always like to remind people, because everybody thinks property tax dollars are the solution to everything. In most counties, we get 20 cents on the dollar from property tax increases, but hopefully it creates an economic climate and people go out and spend money in sales tax, and it helps us in other areas too. So we acknowledge that this is a spending plan that has, it's a leaky boat, and we're going to try and plug those leaks over the next few months and come up with a few other solutions for you. But ultimately, there's no good news in sight for you, and I would anticipate we'll have the same discussion next year at this time unless we can develop some new sources of revenue.
Okay. The chairman had to step out for a minute. He wanted me to take over. So with that, Allison, I'm going to direct you. That's enough talk about the Teeter plan today.
Thank you.
Can you move forward on this?
Okay.
No other questions?
Budget reserves, this is simply letting you know where we stand on the reserves. And as I said, we've made no progress on building them beyond where they have been. So then we come to what we've done in terms of balancing the budget. And so in terms of the 6% cut in assigned, first of all, there were budget reductions up front. And that 6% cut, as we went into the budget discussions, is around $2.4 million. Departments absorbed increases in wages and benefits, mostly through salary savings, et cetera. That represents a savings of about 4.8%. And so that was the upfront stuff. I'm skipping the pictures here. The balancing the budget in terms of budget tightening, so those were the things we did up front. Budget tightening, we refined the projected costs of market adjustments, because when we first went into it, we kind of figured out what the maximum was. We've brought that down to what it's actually going to be, and that is reflected now in the budget, so that the budget is realistic about that. We've suspended the vehicle replacement fund, and that represents around $445,000. Held the line on capital projects and fixed assets, so we have definitely cut back in that area, although those things that are critical are still going forward. We've applied the insurance reimbursement to Mill Creek Dam's projects, and that's the $500,000 that we've got kind of sequestered in the contingency budget. In terms of staffing reductions, there are no net new positions, and I'd have to say, in all my years with the county, this is, I think, one of the few in which there have literally been no positions added. I mean, there's usually maybe one or two somewhere, and there are no. And then reducing positions that were formerly funded, not ones that were empty and unfunded, but ones that were formerly funded, are no longer funded, and they've been taken out. We have budgeted no increases in overtime, and, you know, that's something that, you know, some departments may have some concerns about, but that's where we've tried to hold the line and recognize the board's concern in that area. And then we're researching additional reductions and/or mandatory time off, and that's the discussions we've had. So in all of the balancing of the budget, it's doing the things we did up front. It's doing the things that we did as we met with the departments and put it all together. And then after all of that, there was still about a $2.4 million gap, and for purposes of the proposed budget, what it says is that we're taking that out of the T plan. Use the word. And so that's what we've got at this point for the